All right, what's up, everybody? A quick video today, just talking about some wind while we're cycling. How to handle it, some tips and tricks, some things to look out for, things to be careful for locally, especially for us. And again, this video is for my athletes that I'm coaching, but I think I may put this public just for some more awareness for everybody. We cycle at a place a lot down on Long Island by the water, and from time to time it can be it's a barrier island, so there can be a lot of wind down there. Today was one of those days. We usually get some kind of crosswind, a little bit of a head and a tailwind, but today was a direct on for the long stretch of, a 14-15 mile stretch in each direction of directly with a tailwind, turn around directly with a tailwind and a headwind. So really what we want to talk about is, safety. But what we're really about, let's talk about wind real quick and what wind really does to us. So there's some studies out there on how, you can go somewhere to a training ground and say you can ride 20 miles per hour at it's a calm day, 20 miles per hour in flat terrain at a certain power level. They say that if you're going into a direct headwind, say it's a direct headwind of 10 miles per hour, you can cut that mile per hour in half, minus it from your speed at that power. That's basically what the speed you're going to do that day at that same power level. So what you did last week at 20 miles per hour at a certain power level going, in calm conditions, now with a 10 mile per hour headwind, you're actually only going to be going 15 miles per hour at that same power. That's why when you usually go for a really windy training ride, you see your power numbers are starting to climb up because you're putting more effort in. So you are typically burning some more matches with those windy days, even though at the turnaround you're getting it at your backside, but you're burning up those matches going into the wind. But there's a few tips and tricks we can do in order to make this a more efficient ride and get the most out of it. They actually talked to a bunch of cyclists, and there's some studies out there also that cyclists were actually asked, professional cyclists, what do you think is harder, climbs or stiff headwinds? And believe it or not, the majority of them say stiff, strong headwinds. Why? Because if you go to somewhere where it has climbs or somewhere where you like to go do hill training, typically you know where the hill ends. You know how much effort you need to do to get up to the top of the hill. And at the top of the hill, usually you crest the hill and you can descend down and kind of coast down the other side, and it evens out your power levels. You can recover. But when you're going into a headwind, you don't know when it's going to end. You don't know unless it's at that turnaround. It's just, it doesn't stop. It's relentless. And if you're solo riding, it's just going to be constant. It's going to be, it's basically, in essence, like this stretch of road that we go on, especially this morning, is 14 miles long in one direction. And directly into the headwind, you're talking 14 miles. It's almost like climbing for 14 miles. So you're not. It's not a bad thing because you're going to get stronger at it. But it's just something to think of. When it's very humbling being out there on a day like this. A lot of athletes they start to get like mentally a little demoralized. You're training, everything's going so good, and then all of a sudden you get one of these days where the conditions aren't ideal, and you're wondering, wow, what happened? Where'd my average speed go? But that's why I like power. When we talk about power on a bike, it's the amount of effort that you're actually putting in on the bike. So just because you can average 18 miles per hour on a typical route and you feel good, today you might have only averaged 17.5 or 17.4. But when we measure and go by power, you actually may have put more power down. It was just the conditions that held you back. And that's one way to find out. No, you actually put in a harder effort. So this was actually, a better training ride. You put in more power than last week, even though the results weren't there. And that's why power is good also on races and tracking stuff with power, because you may do one course this year, another course next year. You could have swore your training was better and you were more prepared for it, but somehow your bike split wasn't as fast. It was a couple minutes slower. But if we look at the totality of everything and look at the conditions of the day and the wind, we could see and then look at your power and go, no, you actually put more power down on the bike. So that could be the reason why. It could have been the weather conditions. And there goes into all kinds of angles with the wind as well. Some courses, depending where the turns are and where the wind is for the day, you could swear there was wind everywhere on the course. It is because there is there's more frontal section that gets affected on your bike than it does from a tailwind. So just because you're going what you think is into the wind, it may be a little bit of a front crosswind, and then you make a turn, and now it's more of a headwind, and then you make another turn, go back the other way, and now it's a little bit of a crosswind on the other side. Now you've just made 2 turns thinking you'll get out of the wind, yet you're still going into the wind. So it is what it is. Wind is tough. Wind makes us stronger, but you know, that's just that's nature. These are things that can happen on race day. So it's good to get some of these training days in, especially with the local race coming up, Jones Beach. It could be windy down there. It could be the same as today. You know, there are some things we need to look out for that we should do. So a couple things we should do is, you know, forecast, look out ahead of time, see what's going on, see what the forecast is for that training ride, race day, whatever it is that you have coming up. There is some things you can look up, and I'm going to show you right now, is something I used for Muscleman. I tested it. I found out about it the last race I went to up there. Again, I usually look at the weather forecast for the day. I can see if it's where the wind's coming from, kind of guesstimate on my ride what's going on. But the cool thing is, if you go to, it's called Epic Ride Weather. It's an app on your phone. If you have the GPX file of the course you're doing or the ride you're doing, and I save the local route that we do, you can say, tomorrow at 7 a.m., I'm doing this course, and I'm going to plan on averaging 18.5 miles per hour. It's going to map the start time of your ride with the estimated finish time of your ride and show you the weather. Not only just wind direction and wind speed, but also temperature throughout the ride as it's going to gradually go. And here what you can see is, you know, it's going to show you temperature. It's going to be climbing throughout the day. It's going to show you the humidity, any type of precipitation that may happen, and then that wind right there. It's going to show you the wind, and it's going to show you the gusts of the wind. So today it says we had between times of 10 to 13 mile per hour winds with up to 16 to 19 mile per hour gusts. And this was straight, basically almost a headwind in the direction we were going. So no plan for it. If it's typically going to be a colder morning or it's becoming a spring or fall ride now, just remember if you're starting going into the wind, it could feel a little bit colder that morning and you may have to dress appropriately. But of course, with going into the wind, you have to worry about wind resistance of what you're wearing. If you're going to wear a baggy windbreaker or some type of wind jacket, it may actually slow you down even more or make you have to put more effort into your bike ride. So these are things you got to worry about, is worry about just, you know, what you're going to wear. Maybe if you think it's going to be cold somewhere, make sure you can store that afterwards because it may heat up when you turn around because you're not going to have that wind. And just be cognizant of that and dress appropriately because the wind will play a factor into temperature as well. Be careful as well if you're going out on a windy day or you know it's going to be windy and maybe you want to take that opportunity to get some good training in. Just remember, wind also blows things around. If it's a nice closed path, wherever it is, or on the road, be careful of things that are blown into the roadway. Be careful of some branches or trees that could have come down. Just again, be careful of what's being blown around. As well, some things like to get blown around in the air. Dust, sand. Make sure you have on something covering your eyes, set of sunglasses. Even if it's early or it's going to be overcast, get some type of clear lenses or something that's lightly shaded. Have some different options in that, or make sure you have some really good tinted stuff. If, like this morning, we were going into the sun and couldn't actually see very far in front of us unless you had a proper screen on. Again, also, why is it windy out? Is there a storm coming in? Did the storm just blow away the day before? Just understand the weather and what's going on, especially if it's a destination ride, you're traveling upstate to do your ride, or if it's a race, just understand what's going on with that. And then, again, be one with the wind. Know your bike, tri-bike, road bike. Be comfortable in aero. Be comfortable with being on the drops of your road bike. When we're going into the wind, we do want to make the smallest resistance we can to the wind. So you want to, if you're on the aero bars, you want to be in, you want to be tucked in, you know, close those fingers in on the front, make sure the air, you know, safely you want to be able to see in front of you, but make sure that air is able to go around you as best as possible and streamline. You want to be like a bullet train in the wind. The least amount of resistance we can have, especially for, you know, being the heavier riders out there, like we really need to put a little more power in to get through the wind. And if you're on a road bike, that's fine. You can be down in the drops. If that's not too comfortable for you, maybe your handlebars need to come up a little bit if you're not comfortable being in that position for an extended period of time. This is when all that stretching comes into play, all that little bit of mobility work throughout the week. That's a very big reason why we need to do that, is we're on this bike for an extended period of time, and we really need to be loose, and we need to be able to be in these positions without having backache or back pain. And if we're in these aero type positions on either a tri-bike or a road bike, and you have some type of back pain or something that really always bothers you, make sure you go seek out a good bike fit at your local bike shop. Make sure they can analyze your fit and make sure that it's good, because you want to be comfortable out there. You don't want to be hurting yourself. Going into the wind now. So training into the wind, some tips to think about here is keep an eye on your cadence as well. You don't want to grind in a gear that's too low of a cadence. Some people get stuck in this rut of just really grinding into the wind. Gear down, spin up, try and get to that magical number, that 90 RPM with cadence. That's a very good number that we need to be at. It's going to help you run. It's going to help you not burn out your muscles and your legs. And it's going to help you, use the fuel that you need appropriately that you're taking in your body. On these days, I really like to ride with friends. Again, it's not drafting. It's not, we can call it's. I call a pace line is what really it is you're sharing the wind. Granted, you can go out there, you want to get a solo ride in, you just want to suck it up and do it, by all means, but it is a lot easier. But choose your riding group, know your riding group, because windy rides can be dangerous, especially if you're not familiar or comfortable with the group that you're riding with. You all need to understand each other, hand signals, being able to, take pulls in the front of this pace line group, and, be good at it. So pace lining, if it's a headwind, and I'm not going to get into crosswinds on this because that's more of an advanced technique and you need to kind of stagger your wheels a little bit. I don't like doing that much in a group ride. It's just really not worth it, especially on tri-bikes. But in a pace line group, you want to be front to back going into a headwind with enough room, comfortably with that tire, but enough to be able to not have to put out the maximum amount of power to continue forward progress. And then determine as a group ahead of time. So say you have 3 riders with you, yourself and 2 others. When you're going to take the lead and take the pull into the wind, determine ahead of time how long that's going to be. It could be anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes, or go by mile markers. Thankfully, the Path by Us has mile markers. You can see them in both directions. So something I like to do is, if we know, it's a jamming day with the wind and it is what it is, I'm going to say, all right, as soon as we hit that, we're going to turn around, we're going to hit that wind. As soon as we see the mile marker, an even number, say it says mile 12, we're going down numbers backwards. I'll say, all right, number 12, I'm going to take the first mile, get narrow and steady until we hit mile 11. And then for myself and my group, what we like to do, especially on a closed, narrow path, is I'll signal that my mile is over. I'll put my hand down and I'll wave the group up. Usually 2 or 3 riders. That's a safe amount of riders to do this with. They'll proceed up on the right side, just because it's a lot safer, I think, on a path than them overtaking you on the left side. Especially if you have multiple riders, because if you have people coming in the opposite direction. So I kind of shelter the group a little bit, getting towards the middle line, and shuffle them up, give them a wave. 2 riders come up, I fall into the back, kind of give them a quick yell that I'm good, I'm in the pace line, because you don't want to get dropped from the pace line, because then you're going to be fighting the wind all day by yourself. Next person that's up front is going to take the next mile. Same thing, they'll call up the next rider. And next thing you know, with 3 people, you're taking a mile, you're just getting pulled a little bit for 2 miles. You're taking a mile, getting pulled for 2 miles. This is just going to help you not burn all your matches on a day where it's really windy out. And if you plan it where when you're up front, you kind of give a little push, because you can give a little extra because maybe you just had a little rest for 2 miles, you're actually going to get like an interval workout in. You're going to get some good work. You're going to work at, remember, above that moderate intensity range that we like to kind of, differentiate. You're going to be able to push a little bit, 2 miles, nice and easy. You're going to be able to kind of cruise a little bit. Going into the wind, again, very important to be an aero and be as comfortable as possible. As soon as you stand up, you feel it. That wind just hits you in the chest, slows you down even more, and you got to put even more power out. As far as being safe on the bike, especially a tri-bike, don't white. It's tough, I know, but don't white knuckle your bike, because that's going to cause very abrupt changes in your positioning, especially if you have to go around a corner. Keep the weight on the front, keep the weight on the front wheel, but also just be gentle, you know, and be smooth. Let the wind move you a little bit. If you're so tight with it, you may overcorrect, you may turn your wheel, and next thing you know, unfortunately, you might take a tumble down. Again, you may have to alter if you're not a fan of the wind and you just don't want to do it. You may have to choose to ride a little earlier or a little later in the day, or choose, you know, maybe stay home, stay on the trainer. It is what it is, but, you know, just be careful out there. So again, stay loose on the bike, be ready. You have to be, these rides aren't just physically taxing. They're going to be mentally taxing with conditions like this, because you're going to go out there and you have to think a lot. It's not just a calm day. You're in a group, having fun, going out there. You really need to be careful. You really need to, that gust of wind does come. You don't know where it's coming from. It's invisible. So it may hit you on a turn. It may hit you on a bend where, all of a sudden your front wheel kicks the other way, and you need to be able to be smooth and correct that. Same thing, you grab bottles from the rear, you're refueling, you go to grab, and all of a sudden that stiff wind kicks in, and then all of a sudden you only have one hand on the handlebar. So your mind's going to be in it a lot more, especially as the ride gets longer. We typically mentally get fatigued, and you're going to have to stay, really in the game, and that's going to tire you out even more. So at the end of a day like this, you're not just going to be physically tired, you're legit going to be, mentally exhausted. As well, if you have different wheels, you're, a little lighter rider, you get blown around a little more, it may be time to take those aero wheels off if it's going to be really bad conditions, those deep dish wheels. Go back to something a little more standard. Have that option to maybe be able to do that. And, just prepare for the day or the race, again, because this can be talk for a race during windy conditions. And maybe it's not the day to use those wheels. Last year, Tennessee, I did the bike leg of the Ironman. I had brought my race setup. I had checked the weather ahead of time. I said, it looks pretty good. I'm just doing the bike leg. I want to go for it. And I had an 80 front and a disc wheel. I didn't even know at the start of the bike. Maybe there's a chance of some weather during the day, but we got caught in the mountains. Just this nasty, windy, crazy rainstorm, and I was probably never, I try to say to don't do it, but I was white knuckling the whole time. There was some stiff crosswinds, and actually, it was a little scary out there. And maybe if I would have brought my other wheels and knew that the night before, I would have swapped out and put my, regular training wheels on, my less deep dish wheels. So again, just make sure, know which way the wind is blowing. It's good to check the weather ahead of time to know when you're starting the ride. Is it going to be this way, crosswind, headwind, tailwind, whatever it is? Know the conditions getting as you get into that. And, how can we use it to our advantage? It's going to be a great training day. You can really develop power. A lot of people who went out today were getting like awesome power numbers in their Training Peaks files at the end of the day. Great 10-minute watt segment, 20-minute hour watt segment, just because you physically just need to put up more power in order to move yourself through space. So you can use that to your advantage. And even if you're by yourself and you have a long stretch or a 10-mile stretch of wind, do some intervals with it. You don't need to just grind the whole time through it at this steady state, like almost threshold type bike ride. Just on a whim, say, you know what? All right, I'm gonna push for 2 minutes, and then I'm gonna stay steady for 4 minutes. Push 2 minutes, stay steady for 4 minutes, and that's just gonna help you break that monotony of just grinding through the wind the whole time. And again, keep up with your cadence. Make sure your cadence is following at about that 90 RPM, and try and have at it at about that. We can get into climbing. with headwinds and tailwinds and all that. But if that's just a whole nother element, and again, that's talking about crosswinds and how to deal with that as a group. That would almost be, you know, more of an advanced type talk or video, and we can really get into stuff like that. But you're gonna, if you're gonna go into those conditions, you should definitely be a moderate or advanced rider for those type of conditions to begin with. Develop your sprint speed too. You know, you're getting towards the end of that wind, you know that turnaround's coming up, and you're like, yes, I can't wait to just take that tailwind the rest of the way home for this ride. You know, pop in, give yourself a nice sprint into the wind at the end. You know, push yourself a little bit, see what you can do. It's probably gonna develop you and get you into a higher watts zone anyway because of the resistance with the wind, and you want to go with a certain speed. It's gonna probably, you're gonna have to use a lot more watts, and you're gonna probably get some nice numbers on that, as opposed to if you tried to do that with a nice stiff tailwind. Sometimes the tailwind is so strong down there that when I try and push with a nice tailwind, I actually run out of gears almost and continue to, you know, you're really just like, you're almost maxed out. You're like, oh, I got nothing left. I got no more gears. I'm just pedaling as hard as I can. I got nothing. So again, those are some tips, tricks, things to look out for. How to kind of ride in a group. Use it to your advantage, but be careful when you're in some type of pace line and you come out of the pace line, because you're going to be blasted with that wind if it really is in your face. So be ready for that. Again, be mentally in the game. Be careful. Again, there's nothing worth, you know, being too aggressive out there in any type of group riding, or especially on public roadways. Have fun out there. Make sure you stay safe. That's the biggest thing. And just prepare. You know, thinking about your ride or doing a little investigation into the conditions of your course will pay dividends in the end. It'll make you safer, may make you have a better workout. You'll get more fitness out of it, and you know, you'll stay safe. That's the biggest thing out there. So I hope you got something out of this. Stay safe, stay healthy. Remember, balance out life one mile at a time, and I'll see you on the next one.